David Brewster here from the Three for All, and this is three Marty Friedman licks from 1995. And Marty Friedman's definitely a very exciting and expressive and unique guitarist, and I've been following him for a very long time. And he originally started with Cacophony with Jason Becker. That was kind of his Shrapnel Records, debut on the scene, and definitely, the band with two Yngwies. They just plowed through all this material, and they made a huge impact, when they came out. And they had a couple albums, and then of course Dragon's Kiss, which was his solo album. Becker had Perpetual Burn, and even though they kind of split off and did their own solo albums, they definitely were very close, and really worked together and pushed each other. And both, phenomenal guitarists. Jason Becker is a complete legend, and so is Marty Friedman. And of course, Becker went on to play with David Lee Roth, and Marty went on to move and start playing with Dave Mustaine and Megadeth. And he appears on 5 Megadeth albums and an EP. He's also worked with Tourniquet, and he's had like 15 solo albums and a bunch of other stuff. Now, I'm such a big fan of Marty's. I actually had a lesson in Guitar Player magazine last year. It was in the August 2019 issue, the one that has John 5 on the front. And the lesson was called Tornado of Solos, and that kind of breaks down a lot of the exotic scales and different sounds and ideas that he pulls out in his music. And then if you want to dive a little deeper into some of the Japanese influences that appears in his music, I also had a lesson in the December 2019 issue, the Koto graphic lesson, where we talked about emulating, a koto on a guitar. I also included, kind of a Marty Friedman style lick in that lesson. And that will give you a little bit more insight with Hirajoshi and some of these exotic sounds that you hear in his music. The licks from this lesson actually come from two different sources. There's a live clip that I borrowed a lick from that was in Tokyo, Japan in 1995, and that was live, with Megadeth. And then the other licks and ideas actually came from a guitar clinic that he gave in Finland in 1995. And I'd never seen that footage before, and when I watched it, it's over an hour. It's probably like an hour and a half or something like that. But he's sitting, there on the stage. There's an interpreter that's also playing guitar. And you can't really see the crowd, but they're asking him questions, and he's playing and talking. And it goes on for a really long time, but there's some really cool ideas kind of hiding in that clinic. The other thing that's interesting with this lesson is everything's going to be played with a clean tone or a slightly overdriven tone. So there's no distortion on the amp for this lesson. So turn your distortion and overdrive off and really, kind of man up and play with a clean tone. And if you want to really boost your technique, turn off all your effects and distortion and play with a clean channel. Or pick up an acoustic guitar, and really try to hone in on your technique and phrasing. And then if you can play it with a clean tone or an acoustic, as soon as you step on some distortion and add some effects, it should really sound good. Because once you take all your bells and whistles away, you're basically left with the raw, performance of what you're playing. And distortion and effects, a bunch of delay and all that stuff can kind of mask what you're playing and kind of cover up some of your mistakes. And that's something that you don't want to do. You don't want distortion and effects to cover up what you're doing. The first lick comes from this live solo from Tokyo, Japan from 1995. And it's flirting with A harmonic minor. And, Marty's definitely talked about, influences, from classical music and different composers and different, pieces and symphonies and things like that. And you can really hear it in this phrase. It reminds me of Mozart or somebody like that, where it's busy and it's moving and melodic. It's really cool. It looks like this. And right there you can see we're basically starting on this F note. It's loosely based around A harmonic minor. So that's the first phrase. And then he starts doing this real blurry, slippery phrase where it's almost kind of using like neighbor tones. There's, E down to a D sharp and then back to E to F. And then he goes back to that E and D sharp and then slides up to F sharp. And then he ends right there with an E major arpeggio, which is signaling, you know, harmonic minor in the key of A minor. You know, really unusual phrase, but I like that. And one more thing, I think he was tuned down a half step during that live footage, so I didn't tune down just for that one lick, because everything else in this lesson is going to be in standard. So the pitch of the clip is going to be right here. So on the clip I'm getting ready to play, it's going to sound like A flat, but he actually played it where I just showed it, you know, in A a minute ago. The next lick came from the Guitar Clinic from Finland in 1995, and there's a lot of Q&A with the audience, and then the host is asking Marty questions, and then Marty kind of jams and demonstrates things. And almost the entire clinic, it's, you know, like an hour and a half or an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. Almost the entire clinic, Marty's playing with a clean tone, like almost the whole time. And it's only when people are asking about Megadeth solos or licks, that's when he finally kicks on some distortion to demonstrate things. But I was really impressed by the fact that he didn't really use distortion unless he had to, you know, for some reason, to demonstrate something. But, I mean, he was playing like these jazzy, blues kind of, you know, licks during these little jams and stuff, and it was very different than what you hear him playing, you know, back when he was with Megadeth. But I was impressed. I thought, wow, that takes a lot of focus and control, you know, to basically not rely on distortion like that. And I think he was even using like a borrowed guitar because it still had a price tag hanging on it. He was talking about how his hand kept hitting, you know, the volume control. So, I mean, you know, talk about a very impressive, you know, performance, because he was using borrowed gear in Finland, you know, giving a guitar clinic to a group of people that I don't think really spoke English, but the interpreter, you know, and host was kind of helping, and, you know, I was really impressed. But the lick, it's basically a warm-up exercise, and the audience was kind of asking him about warm-ups. And he really just demonstrates this phrase, and I'm going to show the phrase that he played, and then I'm also going to show you what I did to it because I expanded it through a whole scale. So this is loosely based around B Aeolian, or natural minor, and the sequence or the phrase looks like this. And there you can see we're basically starting on this F sharp. And it's a 6-note pattern, but the way he phrased it's really unusual. Because you're starting there, and then you're continuing there. Now what I did is I took that idea, because I really like that sequence, and I think I've seen Paul Gilbert use that before too. But I like that sequence, and then I literally just moved it through B Aeolian, which is right here. So if you map that out through the whole scale, it looks and sounds like this. And a little bit slower, we're just basically using that same sequence all the way through that scale. Something like that. And I really like finding exercises and warm-ups like that, where it's unusual, it's not a common fingering or something that I'm comfortable with. It's a challenge, you know. I'm mixing those notes around in a really unusual way, or Marty was mixing those notes around in a really unusual way, but that makes it a great workout and exercise. The next lick is another warm-up exercise from this clinic from Finland, and it actually starts in B flat 7, and then it kind of changes to B flat minor 7, and then back to B flat 7. It's something like this. And a little bit slower, you can see we're kind of doing this kind of a roll with the pinky finger between the A and the D string. and there's also this kind of pull-off pattern happening. And it's challenging, but it's got a cool sound, and you've got that repetitive kind of flow to it too. Something like that. And then do the same thing, just lower the third down, you know, from D to D flat. And you can do it really slow. I was kind of playing a little bit faster there, but you can definitely warm up with that slowly. But it's also a cool lick, you know, you could throw that in a solo somewhere. And then you could also like move it around the fretboard. You can change, you know, positions or put it in a different key. We're just going to move it up an octave right here. And that's kind of keeping it, you know, in B flat major, B flat minor. It's the same idea, you know, just kind of moved, you know, a lot higher on the fretboard to the next octave. Here's a bonus lick from the guitar clinic that he gave in Finland, and the interviewer asks him about Japanese guitar phrasing and, you know, Japanese guitar techniques, and then Marty starts playing around with these Hirajoshi licks and phrases. And Hirajoshi is basically a 5-note Japanese pentatonic scale, but it's not the typical, you know, minor or major pentatonic scale that you're probably aware of or familiar with. Really, any 5-note scale, you know, played in music is considered a pentatonic scale. So this particular pentatonic scale, Hirajoshi, would be spelled A, B, C, E, F. And that's not the lick, that's just the scale, you know, A, Hirajoshi. Now the lick that Marty played during the clinic, he's basically phrasing, you know, this melodic idea around that scale. And he's doing these targeted bends where he's thinking of a note, but instead of just, you know, playing the note that he's thinking of, he starts a half step below that note and then bends into it, which immediately, you know, grabs your attention, it captures your ear. It's like, what was that? You know, because your ear definitely picks up on it. You know, you hear the note that he bends to, but you hear that kind of blur of an off note or a wrong note right before it. And that's really crafty. You know, it's something he's been doing for a very long time. And that's one of the things that really perks up everybody's ears when they hear Marty Friedman play, is just the unusual, you know, phrasing that he uses. It's like this. And right there you can see we're starting on this E note. And we're coming down, you know, E, C, B, A, we're grabbing this F. And then we're gonna grab this B flat and you're gonna bend that up a half step to B. Which is really cool. And then right here, he's technically playing an A sus2 arpeggio because he's missing the C. He's grabbing that B right there, which is part of the scale. So he's still, you know, playing Hirajoshi, but he's thinking of an arpeggio, which is so cool. And there he's doing the same thing. He's targeting this B note, but he's bending B flat up to that B. And then he just ends with this little, you know, F to E, E to F to A. That's such a cool lick. All right, that's going to wrap this look at 3 licks from Marty Friedman from 1995. And definitely Marty is a very exciting and expressive and unusual and different, musician and guitarist. And I think that's one of the reasons why people still talk about Marty. They still talk about Megadeth and Rust in Peace and Countdown to Extinction and some of these things, even Cacophony. They'll mention that like it just happened yesterday. But that didn't happen yesterday. That was back in the mid 80s and the early 90s or whatever. I mean, that was a long time ago. And definitely Marty's, a Japanese celebrity. He's lived in Japan for, a few decades now. And continues to release music and continues to tour. And, he's definitely a very exciting and just unusual, musician. And anytime I notice somebody like that, where they're not the same old player, it's something new, something different, their approach, or maybe their just creative spirit and energy is kind of different than most, it immediately captures my attention. And I'm like, who is that? It's like, did you hear that? It doesn't sound like blues licks, it doesn't sound like typical, rock guitar or shred guitar. It's something different, and I really like that. And I definitely, a huge Marty Friedman fan. So leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.